unworked people just happen to be in power. So we've just diagnosed them. They just happen to be the ones most infected by the epidemic, and they're walking loose and hoping that you'll catch it too. But they're not what we first think that they are. They're not just mad politicians, whatever. These are people who have an epidemic. And they happen to always rule the societies because we let them. We permit it to happen. The masses of men and women in the Western world compulsively avoid true, authentic, and psychoanalytical investigations of their natures, even with help, particularly in regards to the so-called darker aspects of the personality, the shadow self, and so on. However, not dealing with the psyche at all proves systemically hazardous, so a compromise is required. So the ego is not stupid. It knows to continually be dumping without any integration will create total pathology. So it thinks, I'm going to get poisoned by all the stench coming from the back alley. Now, we want the house to look good in the front for the neighbors, but this stench is, creeping in. People going, is there something rotting around here? So it has to find a way of coming, doing some dumping, so to speak. So a compensation had to be found. And hence the proliferation of the New Age philosophy and movement, together with its many permutations. Riddled with ego-customized shams and gimmicks, the application of its methods serve, for the most part, to merely bolster the failing ego and its drives. You create inauthentic versions of cleansing, but might do a little topical spring cleaning without going too deep. It's called religion, or New Age movement. Western man has made himself bereft of the rites and rituals, the rites of passage, the shamanic methods for dealing with the buildup of his dark psychic content. As a result, he is patently psychologically arrested. His avoidance condemns mankind and the earth. It engenders psychotic and sadistic leaders who are able to play upon his fears and lower instincts ad infinitum. So we're getting to the core of it now. If we do not autonomously cleanse our psyches and strive to live morally, and if we continue to violate the natural order, remember I said nature goes through these cycles, it can handle the winter when everything dies and putrefies, because it knows what beautiful roses are going to come from that. Nature can do it, but we can't. And if we continue to violate the natural order because of our inner emotional and psychological toxicity, we will allow the ego to manifest surrogate channels to exorcise its repressions and other negative debris. In short, if we give up the right rulership of the self, we inevitably breed Orwellian political and religious tyrants to take over the job and turn us into what George Simmel, the psychologist, sociologist, said, smiling depressives, or worse. And there's two other proclivities, capacities that we have in our minds. In our ego consciousness, we also have two very important things. And again, both necessary, but we've taken them to extremes. And they're called projection and inflation. And the place where we can really examine them is in our relationships. The dark aspects of the personal psyche, which threaten the ego's autonomy and its vision of itself, are repressed, as we said. The shadow is the sum of all that we loathe about ourselves, and we project it onto other people and say they're responsible. This content is subconsciously projected onto others who become our external representatives of our personal shadow selves. In extreme cases, we also project this content through the field of other oblivious victims. That's an important one, but we're not going to get into it now. I'm working on a DVD and a website called Psychic Vampirism. You can go to psychicvampirism.com, and I've got something that's coming out that's going to be monumental on that, but we certainly can't visit that today. And additionally, there is the collective psyche and its dark content, which is at certain times likewise projected. So you do it with your individual mind, but we all do it collectively at certain phases in history. We literally all project on the famous nemesis that's created for us. And the politicians, they know how to manipulate that. We want the easy way out, and they have the pulse on the psyche, and they know how to help us with that kind of false exorcism. They're experts at it. I've always maintained in my work that if you don't know the motives of your enemy, then don't go into fight. You may know your motives, but if you don't know what makes them tick, we have zero knowledge of them. I've said it in the book, and I've said it in many talks. They have incredible knowledge of us. We don't even know what makes them tick. It's time to start finding out. That's like arming up to go and fight, find a tiger to shoot, but you don't have a faintest idea. In your mind, the tiger is a pink animal that flies in the sky. You don't know it's a thing with, inch-long razor-sharp teeth that's going to tear you limb from limb and can smell you coming 10 miles away. What good is it then you fighting the tiger? You're dead and buried and eaten is what's going to happen to you. Which is what has been happening to the brothers and sisters who've been trying to stand up against these leviathans, unfortunately. As I said, when we are not integrated, strong, and healthy psychologically, we invariably turn to external representatives. The parents, the politicians, the teachers, the evangelists, the heroes, the authority figures, the establishment representatives, whoever. And all manner of horrors have arisen because we do this. So yes, our world is full of horror and genocide and mayhem. Let's start discovering why. The approach of Pluto now will arouse fear, paranoia, and the whole cocktail of these darker emotions. That's why we're having this talk. It's because, you see, we're not going to get away with it anymore. Very soon now, it's already actually been happening, but get ready for it. Now, these effects can confuse you. They can confuse and threaten both protagonist and antagonist. See, you may not be a generator or even a creator of dark, toxic energy too much, right? But you certainly will be the receiver of it from those who are. So you're going to have to know about what's coming, because if you don't, and the masks start coming down, and this toxicity starts coming out in people around you that you think you love, or that they've been fooling you into thinking that they love you, let's put it that way, you're going to be very shocked, and as a result, might do something very off or wrong, or you can be destabilized. And I don't want that to happen. I believe that the good people should have good times ahead. Shouldn't be again having to start from scratch again. Well, we can help that happen by having some knowledge about what might be coming down tomorrow, so that you're not completely shattered. Subsequently, the individuals will feel deeply insecure, and as a result tend to cleave even more vehemently to the known and familiar Saturnian archetypes. And the one I'm most concerned with and thinking about the most is known as the animus, which is a Latin word for the father, or more colloquially, Big Daddy. Very important archetype that make up ego consciousness. And very, very prevalent in the world. Big Daddy is what it's known as. And it has the most important effect. As we understand what our egos are doing, we'll understand why we create. Now, of course, we know that what is Big Daddy? It's nothing more than a re-scripting of the old Jehovah. I mean, this is an old deal we're talking about here. Now, look at the relationship of Jehovah to the so-called chosen people. It wasn't because they, wove the great tapestries, or they made the best sandals, or that they built great empires, or made great jewelry, or great lovers of women, or whatever. What was the reason why Jehovah was protecting, loving, and adoring the chosen people? One word: they were obedient. The relationship between the Father and the Son, you see, is one of obedience. That's what gets you the power and security that the Father offers you. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. The Bible is telling you about the animus. The Bible is telling you what God and this Father figure is. It's belligerent. Remember, you're going to it because you want protection, because you have no security inside yourself. And it's going to do its number. It's going to do its dance. Don't blame it. It's doing what it was paid to do. Paid with psychological energy. There's one other important psychological complex that we need to look at, and that's called identification. And we all do it. You have to identify with your heroes and things, otherwise, you couldn't survive. Identification is that you identify with your parents and the good side of, your heroes and so on and so forth. So it's a natural, healthy drive. But again, it's taken to extremes in certain situations. The extreme of it is known as the identification with the object of one's hate. The identification with the object of one's hate? Meaning you hate something, but you identify with it? Why would you do that? Now, when states and people are unhealthy and not sovereign, they give their power away to demagogues and champions who possess the ability to lead them anywhere. The slave has an ambivalent relationship with the master. He may despise the master, but he may also envy him and need his attention and affection, because we do need. We are in dependence. You are a slave of the approval and the needs of others, and if you don't have it, look what happens to you. Now, the slave has an inferiority complex and does not think or act for himself. In fact, he prefers that others do the thinking for him. In return for this, he offers service, work, and above all, obedience. It's the master versus slave. Now, see, of course, hate is in the eyes of both. The whole relationship is based on hate. But the slave is thinking, well, this guy can kill me. So, instead of death, slavery, death, slavery, death, All right, done deal, slavery. Just give me a few cushions every time, once in a while for my prison cell, and a little salt in my bowl of gruel, and I'm happy. Give me chains of iron instead of gold, and hey, brother, go and do whatever you want. Go and murder and mutilate in my name. I don't care. I'm happy. Glenn Parton said, "We have internalized our masters," which is a well-known psychological response to trauma. See, trauma again. When faced with the overwhelming terror, haven't we heard that word recently? Quite a lot. The human mind splits, with part of itself modeling itself after the oppressor. It is an act of appeasement. Look, you're saying, I'm like you, so don't harm me. Simply called identification. A New York Times CBS poll noted that only 6% opposed military action, while a substantial majority favored war, even if many thousands of innocent civilians are killed. Simultaneously, Bush's approval rating has soared. Like all tyrants and demagogues, Adolf Hitler didn't force himself into power, he was voted in. Identification with the object of one's hate. Here's a couple of extreme examples of it, because this thing takes many forms. A female, in fact, identification complex is very much in the female, is an aspect of the female psyche. Here's two extreme examples of it to make the point. Say, for instance, you have a very ambivalent relationship with the father because the father, and rightly so, the father has in fact wounded you at some point in your youth. And you have a primal wound created by the father left, the father hurt you, whatever. It happens. You hate the father immensely for the wrong that he did, and you should. That hate is perfectly legitimate. But if you hate the father too much, it will often prevent a woman from integrating in society, because the father is also the boss, you see, the senior, the state, the system. So your hate for your father prevents you from winning in the world. So then the ego now has to think, well, how do I make a compensation? So what the female psyche often does is it identifies with the object of its hate. And here's a couple of examples of it. And this is physicalizing it, where it's a woman, but it's not really a woman, it's a man. It's a person saying, I want to be male. Because I'm in deep hatred of my father, haven't worked it out, I'm not resolving it, don't know how. But I need the attention. I need to make it in the system. And if I'm in rebellious against the Saturnian system, I'm getting nowhere. And I have a healthy drive that wants to succeed and get somewhere and have a good life. So you're in a what's known as a catch-22 situation. And you resolve it in these ways that are known as sublimation. And they're extreme. It's through sublimation. And we all do this to a certain extent. You think you don't have something, or you think that you're without something, and then you find a substitute for it. This is a very powerful archetype, this identification. But there's another version of the same thing. Only we know it as rebellion. It's the opposite side of the coin. It's like, hey, I'm not playing into all of that. I hate the father and the system and all that bogus stuff. Going to school, getting up in the morning, going and getting a job, all that straight up and down square stuff. You're in hatred of it, but you're not going to identify with it. You're going to say, hey, I rebel against it. Now, you can argue which is the healthier drive. I don't know. And then you had a whole culture of it here in the 60s. But see, what is rebellion really? Isn't it really the other side of the coin of the subservience? In Rome, no one complained when Caligula made his horse the emperor. That's the identification, right, with the object of one's hate. Go ahead, do whatever you want. The rebel goes, to hell with that. I will say something. But do you see that the rebellion is still isn't it dependent on the discipline, on the father? It's still tied to the actions of the father. The rebel is a healthy in a way because he's seeing the dumbed downness. He's seeing the utter control and the gaga people. They're acting like sheeple. So the rebel tries to, in his own way, as dysfunctional as it is, he's trying to say, but I don't buy into all of that. I see it as a lie. And how can you not see it as a lie? We've got a one-party system happening here. We've got blustering maniacs who are going to push it down everybody's throat with lie upon lie upon lie. Because you see, look, they say, look, you want to live in a box where you can hear the toilet flushing next door and with some slumlord, we can accommodate you. You want to pay through the nose for a useless car, we can accommodate you. You want to go ahead and live in a dead-end, get yourself a dead-end job in which you're stuck in scale labor for the rest of your life, the system can absolutely accommodate you. You want to buy into a false lie and believe a lie after lie after lie to cover the other lies, we absolutely can accommodate you. You want to live in a world where you have a political system of tyrants where you can vote for them to go and mass murder, we can accommodate you. But if you want to live in a world where you're independent and you have a healthy system, we can't accommodate you. That's the message. So the rebel goes, then I'm out of here. I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing. You see, so it's semi-healthy. You get a medal for knowing what you don't want to do. As a tarot reader or as a diviner, as an astrologer, I can tell you that most of my clients, and I'm sure this will be corroborated by anyone else who works in this field, I'm visited by so many people who absolutely have got to that point in their life where they do not know what it is that they do know what they don't want to do. Their problem is what it is that they have to do or should be doing, their destiny. Because there's all the difference in the world between that, knowing what you don't want to do, and you get a medal for that. That's great. A lot of people never even get to that stage. But the secret of life, the magic of life, is that we often don't know what it is that we want to do, and then we make the mistake of turning to authority figures to go, they're going to tell me. The trick is that only you know what it is you want. That's the whole point. And until you create it for yourself, it's not going to be there. You can model yourself on others perhaps a little bit, and browse the field. But only you can begin the process of lighting the fuse of what you need to be. Sam Peckinpah created himself. Van Gogh, Michelangelo, the whole list. You create yourself. But they've put so many bread and circuses in front of us that we are gaga. We don't even know what's happening. Think for ourselves, we can't even get that far. They're doing the thinking for us, and they can hand us whatever they want. They can even create a faux conflict and say, look, we know you're unhappy. We know you're oppressed. We know you hate our guts. But you know what? We'll give you a way to do something about it. We'll create a political system, a pigsty, in which you can go in there and cluck and chip at each other, like those cockerel fights. That's what you need to do. You need to go and do that. And that'll bring us down. So they create a fake game of dialectics for us, and then we exhaust all our energy in this political pigsty created by our masters, and then wonder why nothing moves a smegging inch forward. And they're laughing, they're having a field day, they're dancing on their desk going, these chumps bought into this? Yeah, well, that's right, our forefathers only lived about 25 years of age. We've got a lot of growing to do. So that, the rebellion is healthy in a way, but never forget it is merely the other side of the coin of the problem. It's saying I don't want to, be part of the problem anymore. But yet, as you saw in the 1960s, and as you still see, there's not too much solution stuff happening. They've got so far to realize it's a horrific, deathly system that's going on. And I mean, the symbolism of these people is already telling you who they and what they are. Because really nothing's been hidden. Even the colors, the red and the blue, are the degrees of Freemasonry. I mean, as we know, I hope everyone in this room knows that this is a one-party creature. And I showed Michael Moore's picture earlier because, you see, he is a great exemplar, and there's plenty of them, of this faux opposition. The game is like this. If you don't create your own rival, you might have to come up against one that really does mean business. You don't want that. You don't want the real fighters. You don't want those who are going to come and try and take down your system, of which there's been a few people like that in history. So you invent and fund and pay and clothe your own guy. Case in point. Michael Moore was interviewed during the summer of 2004 and asked repeatedly by Charlie Rose what the real reasons, this is after Fahrenheit 9/11, it's all done, and millions of dollars have been thrown around. What was the real reasons for Bush's alarming aggressive tactics and why so many liberties and rights were being flagrantly disregarded? Moore answered back in the same manner every time he was asked the same question, and I believe he was asked about half a dozen times. And his answer was, I don't know. Immediately, I knew that he works for them. You don't know? Excuse me, you've just thrown millions of dollars around. You've given a 70% fact because we are angry. So we'll follow this guy thinking he's got a piece of the truth. And just like they show you in The Meaning of Life, Monty Python, come with me, come. The waiter is leading, remember? And they end up nowhere. Aren't they the false gurus? Come. I'm going to show you where I live. I got a mystery I'm going to show you. Leads them through all the streets and up and down and all around. And then what? To an empty bloody field. I don't know. Well, that is not good enough. For you to be on primetime television with all of that time? Guess what? Alex Jones knows. Anthony Hilder could find out. Jordan Maxwell managed it. The people of America are managing it, but you can't find out? You have nothing to say? meaning you know the problem, but you don't know what it is. Brilliant. I say to hell with that. It's in our face what is wrong. What is wrong is it's a one-party system. And this dialectic, we need to become very familiar with how it's worked, because behind the scenes it's just one guy. It's like I discovered in Ireland, the Irish Republican Army. Yeah, they had to change their name to the Irish Republican Army because they were originally called the Irish Republican Brotherhood, which is a very different meaning. That's Freemasonic. I start finding out that the little dove of Sinn Féin is the dove of the Knights of Malta and the Knights of Cologne. I start finding out that the green ribbon that Sinn Féin, Jerry Adams guy wears, like it looks like the AIDS ribbon. Oh my goodness, that goes to a group called the Green Ribbon Lodge. Green Ribbon Lodge? Which is an outgrowth of the ancient order of Hibernians? What are we talking about? First it was armies and revolution, and now it's secret societies. Who's this orange on one side and the green on the other and the white in the middle? Ah, nobody talks about the white. Who are the white pure ones that control both sides of that conflict? I started to have questions. Well, you can create Judaism in opposition to Christianity by the same hand. You can, by the same hand, create Catholicism and then create its opposition, Protestantism. You can create communism and say it's opposed to capitalism. You can create Democrats and then say they're opposed to the Republicans. And I ask you this then, is the enemy really the problem? All generals know that the enemy is not your problem. The problem is the ones that are meant to be marching with you who haven't the faintest idea what's going on. Or they're fearful and undereducated about the fight. When a warrior is going to battle, if he sees fear and ambivalence in the eyes of his comrades, he knows that you're good as dead. Remember Braveheart? In this fight, that's what the problem is. It's the members of our own contingent who are out to lunch, who haven't got clear on what's happening, who are undereducated, misinformed, or fearful. Mikhail Bakunin, one of my great heroes, the father of anarchism, who rotted in Tsarist jails until his teeth rotted out, 18 years chained to a wall in pitch darkness. This is only one of the imprisonments that this man had to go through. And when he came out, within 5 minutes, he's again writing on humanity and down with these tyrants. No, all his life long, would never stop fighting autocracy. Yet, this man from his own words says, I'll take 1,000 Tsars over one Karl Marx. That's informed. Yet, isn't Karl Marx meant to be a socialist on the same side as Bakunin? We're all one. Down with the king, down with the Tsar. Bakunin says, no, down with you. I know you who you are. He said, a herd of animals organized by compulsion and force and concerned only with material interests, ignoring the spiritual side of life. At his own time, that's what he said the revolutionaries are. And of course, don't we know that the hand that crushes the tyrant's head becomes a tyrant in his stead? The enemy is not your problem. And that's a big theme. Never forget that. The enemy, in fact, you know something? The enemy that we so-called think is so awful and terrible, we've been taken out years ago. They're very weak. That's why they're called a hidden elite. Of course they're hidden. They know if we knew about them, we would destroy them in 5 minutes. When America finally wakes up, it'll be like Gulliver. You remember Gulliver was held down by all those little people? Well, when Gulliver finally wakes up, he'll be able to dust these George Bushes off their shoulders and throw them into the ocean. Because these individuals themselves are not spiritually pure and clean and cannot rise up high to feel high. So their mentality is to push and artificially repress good people so they feel great. They're not actually doing anything to spiritually progress or mature, but they are doing a lot to hold you down, and that's how they get their feeling of greatness. The petty tyrant in your neighborhood does the same thing. The bully in school does the same thing. So we've found no weapons of mass destruction. It's a myth in the mind of psychically pathological people. Al-Qaeda didn't exist. And the only time it ever even looked like it might have existed, it was funded by the same neocons from New York City. The only time any kind of Islamic extremism ever even looked like it was on the map, or jihadist motives, was when you guys were, not you guys, but the American government was funding it. Remember those old Rambo movies? There's the proof. With the Mujahideen and the extremists and the Taliban in Afghanistan to fight the Soviets. When the Soviets were pulling out, remember? If you don't know this, when the Soviets were pulling out, one of the generals told America that you have a bigger problem on your hand than we. Thank you, you've destroyed us, you've won, we're leaving, but I'll just give you a case in point. We've observed something since we've been in Afghanistan. You're going to have a bigger problem down the line 10 years from now with these Islamic extremists. But America didn't listen because America's funding them. Now, when Bush finally gets his position as president, he's big behind the pro-Zionist Evangelists that are all over the television and rising now. But wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? On paper, aren't the extreme right-wing Christian pro-Zionist evangelists meant to be the opposers of guess who? The extreme jihadist Islamics, on paper. But they're funded by the same force. The same neocons, the same Straussians from New York City are funding the same group. It's recent history, it's in your face. My goodness, we don't have to be looking to ancient conspiracies and Mikhail Bakunin. As your great G. Edward Griffin said, deliberately create problems and then offer only those solutions which result in the expansion of government. Create conditions so frightful at home and abroad that abandonment of personal liberties and national sovereignty will appear as a reasonable price for a return to domestic tranquility and world peace. The teacher speaks. So when you see this toxic religion, of course there's going to be a cop-out from the rebel. The rebel doesn't know what we're talking about, but he knows that something's wrong with daddy and all that BS. So he's going to cop out. Can't blame him. Let's run the video.
Troops surrounded Jerusalem and laid siege to it, and it produced massive starvation. Luke 21:20 says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, flee and know that the desolation is about to happen. Historian Josephus tells the story of Roman soldiers going from house to house, killing the survivors of the siege, people who were too weak from starvation to defend themselves, and walked into the home of a mother who was eating her infant child. And even they backed out. Josephus says that 1.1 million Jewish people died right there. Jerusalem was demolished. The temple was torn down. Jesus saw it and he wept. Remember, on his way to Calvary, he saw the Jewish women weeping for him, and he said, daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and weep for your children and your children's children. Why? Because he said then, blessed are the breasts that never gave suck. Message, blessed is the woman who has no child, because when the Romans get here, you're going to fight over that child for something to eat. 60 years after Titus came Hadrian, and the Roman legions once again attacked Jerusalem as 500,000 Jewish people were killed. Hadrian hated the Jews. He removed the name of Judea from all the maps. He said, I'm going to remove the name of the Jews from the world's mind. And he had every map purged of the word Judea, and he wrote in its place Palestine, after the ancient enemies of Israel, the Philistines, of whom Goliath of Gath was their champion. The Palestinians, who claim that Israel is their land in the 21st century, never owned the land. They have no legitimate claim to the land. They have only the hatred of Hadrian, the Roman general, for the historical confusion about to whom the land belongs. I assure you that historical confusion is clarified in the Word of God. Jesus wept when he saw the Crusades in 1099, where 900 plus Jewish people were burned alive in the Jewish synagogue as the Crusaders marched under the sign of the cross and herded Jewish men, women, and children into the synagogue, set it on fire, and cremated them while they sang, Christ, we adore thee. There were 7 major Roman Catholic crusades in which the Jews were butchered from Europe to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem back to Europe. Jesus saw it and he wept. He wept when he saw the Spanish Inquisition, where the bones of dead men, the bones of dead Jews, were dug up by the Inquisition of the Roman Church, put on trial. And when those dead people couldn't defend themselves, the church expropriated all of their wealth and put it in the church treasurer. He saw Hitler's Holocaust and the systematic murder of 6 million people, and he wept. He saw all of that. Jesus wept when he saw the Jews of the 21st century being forced out of their homes in Gaza to fulfill the political pipe dream of the roadmap to peace. Jesus wept when he saw the coming of the Antichrist in the near future, a false Messiah coming out of Europe, who will make a 7-year peace treaty with Israel. He will break it in 3.5 years. He will set his image up in the city of Jerusalem for the world to worship him. And anyone who will not worship him will be executed. Jesus saw that, and he wept. And that Antichrist is coming soon. But I want you to hear this. The tears of Jesus over the abuse of the Jewish people and Israel are about to stop. Why? Because the Lamb of God in the book of Matthew is about to come back as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. The rabbi who rode a donkey into the streets of Jerusalem and was crucified a week later is about to ride through the clouds of heaven on a white horse, followed by the armies which are in heaven. And on his head shall be a crown, King of kings and Lord of lords. And he's going to rule this earth for 1,000 years from the Temple Mount of his father, King David, in the city of Jerusalem. And he's going to rule the earth with a rod of iron. What does that mean? It means he's not going to ask the Supreme Court if it's all right to pray. He's not going to ask the ACLU if the Ten Commandments can stand. It will be ruled by the law of the living God without apology. Put your hands together and give him praise and glory in the house of God. The Nazarene that was dragged before Pilate and Herod will have kings and queens and presidents and prime ministers and senators and congressmen, the rich and the mighty and the powerful, line up and bow before him. For every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. It's going to happen in the city of Jerusalem. Quickly, the 7 signs of his coming. The first sign is the rebirth of Israel. Jesus told his disciples in Matthew 24:32, now learn a parable about the fig tree, which is Israel. When you see the branch begin to bloom again means that it was dead for a while. You will know that my coming is even at the door. Now in the Bible, when you say that, that means his hand is on the doorknob. When the Romans crushed Jerusalem in 70 A.D., the diaspora began. The fig tree figuratively died. On May 15th, 1948, the fig tree was reborn in a day, as prophesied by Isaiah 66 and 8. The tree is blooming again. Israel is alive. Israel is alive. Israel is alive. The King of glory is on his way. If you listen closely, you can hear the footsteps of Messiah shuffling through the clouds of heaven. Messiah is coming. Messiah is coming. Messiah is coming. And he will be King of kings and Lord of lords. Give him praise and glory in the house of God. The second sign of his coming is the birth of nuclear warfare. Before the birth of nuclear warfare...
Go ahead. This is a clip that exemplifies many things. I mean, some of the rhetoric that he's speaking about of white horses and crowns above the head and all of this stuff is very little to do with Christianity. Anyone who's been following my work in the cult of Aton will understand that even the terminology that's being used by these people is certainly not Christian in origin. And the Messiah that they're talking about coming is not a Christian understanding at all. More than that, he's standing on the red carpet. That alone is alarming enough for those who understand what that means. But what I really wanted to exemplify with this is, do you see the tone of belligerence and aggression? Do you understand, if you wanted a picture of the animus, here it is. These evangelists, as all priests and potentates exemplify, is that animus that we've been talking about. And the tonality, you don't even have to be a behaviorist or a psychoanalyst to understand that it is violence and aggression and belligerence that is behind this. But what? It's sweetened up and cloaked with religion and spirituality. But of course, it's none of those things. It's the beast in action. And they have an agenda. When I watch people like this, these horrific types, it makes me think of what Konrad Lorenz was saying, that man is the missing link between apes and human beings. And as it says in Exodus, nobody's denying it. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. It's all Martian. But I'm reminded of Jeremiah chapter 5, 26. Among my people are wicked men who lie in wait. Among my people are wicked men who lie in wait, like men who snare birds and like those who set traps to catch men. Like cages full of birds, their houses are full of deceit. They have become rich and powerful and have grown fat and sleek. Their evil deeds have no limit, and that's no exaggeration. What these people do behind closed doors also is horrific. But they themselves are merely lieutenants of something higher, of more insidious hierarchs that work from behind the scenes. But again, I want to emphasize the disguised sadism of all of this. And anyway, most of Christianity most of religion is merely disguised sadism. Turn the other cheek, bless those who hurt you, martyrdom to the endless needs of others. What is all of that? That's not healthy. But you just put a little smoke screen on it. The image of the Christ that they're using, dying hideously, tortured on the cross, which they've just again ingratiated you with the Jesuit crony, Mel Gibson, pushing that image down your throat, because it's based on these complexes of consciousness and the sadism that is lurking in the limbic realms of all people. That's how they earn their daily bread. And that sadism is in evidence all around us. But you see, what we do is we act sadistically and say, but don't blame me. I was taking orders. Blame them. And then you go further up and it's go, no, but don't blame me. I received it from up there. What are you talking about? I'm not sadistic. Because as long as we are slaves to the master, we can always blame the master. The master goes, that's right, that's right. You're off the hook, you see. You have immunity because you have given me your allegiance. So you can go out there also and create horrors in my name, and I'll take the blame. And do you know something? The ego is well happy to do that. So we have healthy and unhealthy forms of rebellion. But as any Aquarian will only be too happy to tell you, their sign and their planet Uranus is connected to rebellion. But then so must Pluto be, because Pluto is closely connected to Aquarius, you see? Now, this spirit of rebellion happens to have been quite conspicuous in the world since the discovery of the planet Pluto, has it not? You see, the Mikhail Bakunins and the other forms of rebellion and revolution and anarchy that you have in the world, they couldn't really exist too openly in the Victorian age. It's been since the discovery of Pluto that this has been moving in the world. You couldn't have a Woodstock, you see, and a hippie movement and all of these things. Those are all symptoms of a new paradigm. But the thing is that the kind of rebellion born from reaction will not avail true change. It is merely a temporary personal and social alleviation. In the movie, always jumps to my mind, Quadrophenia, there is the analysis, if I might say, beautiful treatment of the true spirit of rebellion. Where you have the person who is thinking that he's going to be unique because he's a mod. I don't want to be like everybody else. That's why I'm a mod, see? Then he wakes up to find out that, look, being a mod means that you have no identity. And this person finally works it all out and realizes he's not independent. And so in his personal drama, he breaks through the lie of identification, you see. In that movie, they show you the identification of the object of hate, and they also show the act of rebellion and the fiction of that, and how this person then incredibly passes through and discovers his own androgyny and his own mastery. A tremendous treatment of the positive side of rebellion by people who understood not to buy into all the lie. Because then you got a mod, then you got the rockers, you see? Right away, you've got the conflict again. And this person wakes up to see it and acknowledge it. But the rest of us, we're just happy with the rebellion. Because we never forget that Father also has our money bags in his hand. So we need a kind of a topical alleviation occasionally. Like things like the Burning Man Festival. They appear to be, the counterculture, but you'll find very, very few aware people there. Really, when it comes down to it. You'll find lots of rebels with a small r. But you will find very people who have a faintest idea of how to really change the system. As we said, there's a deep connection between Pluto and Uranus, Scorpio and Aquarius, and this act of rebellion, the spirit of rebellion, is coming in with Pluto. So if the astrological jargon is, hard to get your mind around, don't worry. Pluto represents an act of true holistic rebellion against all that is punitive and corrupt. But as we just saw in the video clip, that rides against the establishment. And it's an old story. Martin Luther, the founder of Protestantism, says nothing is more poisonous, harmful, or devilish than a man in rebellion. Christianity and these organizations, these organized religions, as well as the corporate dominance and governments, they're there to erase your spirit of rebellion. That's their modus operandi. That's why they exist. They don't exist to take you to God or to heaven. There's very few enlightened people in Christianity, if you haven't noticed. There's very few enlightened people anywhere in the world, including on the banks of the Ganges. But what there is conformity, violence, subservience to tradition, and untold sadism to the self and to others. And there is the obvious control and subjugation of the true spirit of rebellion. Aldous Huxley, and he should know because he was one of the people devising ways to keep people down, he said, "It is perfectly possible for a man to be out of prison and yet not free, to be under no physical constraint and yet to be psychologically captive, compelled to think, feel, and act as the representatives of the national state or of some private interest within the nation wants him to think, feel, and act. The nature of psychological compulsion is such that those who act under constraint remain under the impression that they are acting of their own initiative." That's key. The victim of mind manipulation does not know that he is a victim. To him, the walls of his prison are invisible, and he believes himself to be free. That he is not free is only apparent to other people. His servitude is strictly objective. You see, anyone who's had to deal, anybody here has actually had to deal with psychotic people or schizophrenics or people, it's very difficult to tell those people that their thinking is deranged. They think they're perfectly normal. Partly, as I said, they've adjusted to reality as they see it, so they're not wholly to blame. But even in the worst chronic syndrome, you will find that you're wasting your time. You could roll out your soul like a red carpet and they'll walk right on it. Because they are thinking you're the dummy. You're the dumbass. You got it wrong. Charles T. Tart called it consensus trance. In short, I would say if it's not in the media, then most people think it didn't happen. Because they don't know what's going on in the other state or whatever. And if you came and told them, they probably think you're a crank and wouldn't believe it. But you put it on CNN and it happened. And conversely, if it did not happen, but is in the media, we believe it happened. The moon landing, for instance. Guess what? It didn't happen. Now, Edward Bernays, a master of propaganda and control of the human race, said, if we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it. It's not free and enlighten the masses he's talking about. No. These guys don't want to do anything have anything to do with that. They're busy spending money to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it. As John D. Rockefeller said, people are yielding themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. Bernays went on to say, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power in our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. We are dominated by a relatively small number of persons. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind and who harness social forces and contrive new ways to bind and guide the world. Erich Fromm, in his Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, a book I wish everybody would read, the sick individual finds himself at home with all other similarly sick individuals. The whole culture is geared to this kind of pathology. The result is that the average individual does not experience the separateness and isolation the fully schizophrenic person feels. He feels at ease amongst those who suffer from the same deformation. In fact, it is the fully sane person who feels isolated in the insane society. And he may suffer so much from the incapacity to communicate that it is he who may become psychotic. And haven't we all experienced that? From the time we were born, I assume everyone in this room has experienced that. And I would also say this, that if you are sane enough to see the insanity, that's a damn good sign, because it means you're not insane. So as bad as it is to feel bad about the things that are happening, look at the bright side. You can see it. It's they live. When in group narcissism, says Erich Fromm, the object is not the individual, but the group to which he belongs. The assertion that my country or nation or religion is the most wonderful, the most cultural, the most powerful, the most peace-loving does not sound crazy at all. On the contrary, it sounds like an expression of patriotism, faith, and loyalty. And of course, they help us by cutting it up very, very small for us. Since we have decided not to think for ourselves, and they're doing the thinking for us, they also go, look, we won't get into all the complications. So we will cut it up nice and small for baby to swallow. But a rational man will say, electing mass murderers to commission professional murderers to commit genocide in our name does not mean that we are innocent. David Rockefeller said in his address to the Trilateral Commission, we are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march forward to world government. But thank you, you representatives of the people, for keeping quiet and taking our backhanders and doing as you were told. Thank you for serving us and not the people, because we would have been routed out long ago had you not kept silent. If you hadn't handed them the bread, the bread and circuses, and wearing what Paris Hilton is wearing today, and Geraldo and the whole other circus, the Jerry Springers and whatever, the whole lot of it. Thank you, because we could not have operated for 5 seconds without your help. In 2000, in his memoirs, David Rockefeller said, for more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents, such as my encounter with Castro, to attack the Rockefeller family for inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe that we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interest of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that is the charge, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it. They don't mind telling you. You see, this country has never been a democracy. It's always been an aristocracy. And they just don't wear robes and ride down the middle of the street with silk slippers on and a big crown. Because if they did, we were sick of it, you see. When America got started, the people knew all that. They thought they were getting away from that. So they kept quiet for about 100 years. Now they're just letting you know. Now they're just saying, okay, we're all through being quiet. Of course, anybody with a brain cell knew that it was an oligarchy, a plutocracy. But most of the people thought, no, it's a democracy. Now they're just telling you, no, it's not. We are royal blood, and we're going to treat you with a contemptuous way. Because you don't tell us what to do. We tell you how it is. And as Jung himself said, one of the greatest intellects that ever graced this planet, Carl Gustav Jung said, the larger a society or confederacy, the greater the amalgamation of collective, remember, as opposed to independence, collective factors, which is typical of every large organization. The more aggravated the moral and spiritual degeneration of the individual. It's very simple. But you've been told. You've had glowing lights in this country who've warned you against it. Just don't give in. Find your selfhood. Be sovereign. Be strong. Be real. How can you solve the needs of another when you don't even know what your own needs are? How can you live as a slave to the needs and approval of others? Stand up. A person who came from the hells of hells, who saw the worst kind of tyranny in Russia. She said, if one values human life, one cannot value its destroyers. But wait a minute. We know that in a way we can. Haven't we just talked about Freud? And that, you see, there is a pleasure in this destruction. That people who claim to like life do get a kick out of destruction. They are able to do so. That is, the pathological person can. The combined military expenditures of all the world's governments in 1987 were so large that all of the social programs of the United Nations could be financed for 300 years. So don't worry about cleaning up the mess and why is the world... It's very simple to clean up the problems. You just get rid of the impediment that's stopping it. You don't dream up new ways of doing it. It's because there's an epidemic in our midst, a virus in our midst. There's a vulture at loose. Another two books I will mention from the great psychologist Arno Gruen. The Insanity of Normality and the Betrayal of the Self. The Fear of Autonomy in Men and Women. And then we have to address this incredible mechanism. In the beginning we said, how is this accomplished? How do they do it? How does the control of the mind, the governmenta, happen? Frank Herbert said, fear is the mind killer. Right from here, Los Angeles, the magician and occultist Manly Palmer Hall said, to repress rebellion is to maintain the status quo, a condition which binds the mortal creature in a state of intellectual or physical slavery. But it is impossible to chain man merely by slaving his body. The mind also must be held, and to accomplish this, fear is the accepted weapon. The common man must fear life, fear death, fear God, fear the devil, and fear most his overlords, the keepers of his destiny. It's the master-slave, and it begins from the moment that you enter school. The teacher is a slave of somebody else. He's going to treat you like a slave, the false teacher. And of course, not having any security within, that we're a jellyfish within, we're a miasma of mess. Then again, in comes the boss. In comes Big Daddy. And they will restore order. Like it says right there. Novus ordo seclorum. There will be an order. But what kind of order will it be? It won't be an organic, natural order of discipline and passion, you see, in reality. No, it'll be the boot stamping in the face of humanity forever, as George Orwell said. We got George Bush fulfilling George Orwell's theories. George Bush Sr. said that if the American people had ever known the truth about what we Bushes have done to this nation, we would be chased down the streets and lynched. He said that straight in an interview in 1992. We have the quote. But that's right. They don't even mind you knowing that it was engineered. But they can engineer it anyway, because it's not just the first one. Because they know that you're going to give up your rights for the security that they bring. You read it, or the world is now reading it politically. I don't give a damn about politics. I'm into psychology. I know what's behind all of that. It's not just done. This is just one more recent, example of what man has done century after century. What everyone is doing, even in their most intimate relationships. This is just on a macro political level. It's affecting and disaffecting America. But it's an old story psychologically. And the state becomes the sole guarantor of our self-preservation. That's basically what it is. And the symbolism alone is alarming because, you see, these guys know how to wear the devil's horns when it's needed. Because he's animus, remember, right? But we got to realize they don't just work on archetypally, in one area. They are composite. They can put on different masks whenever it's needed. They can be the strong father animus figure when they need to be. But they can also play a little bit of the Thanatos for you if that needs to be. And they can even play a little bit of, the devil role for you. But mostly it's animus. Mars, Saturn, the sun, the solar god. But they play with archetypes. Just like, cream floats to the top in milk, well, in politics, scum is what rises to the top. As William S. Burroughs said, we must all face the fact that our leaders are certifiably insane. Or worse. And I think that last statement is very interesting, or worse, because that ties in with the book, my work in Atlantis. That, I know what worse means. It's not just a matter of simple insanity. We're dealing with off-world presences here. But the idea can be simply stated like this. Vultures and carrion crows, with no disrespect to those animals, don't normally, you find them with a serviette stuck down their neck, seeking their food in a Japanese tea garden, do you? The sewer rat will be found in a sewer. If you find a dead corpse, expect maggots. So when the psychopath is then promoted by us to their positions of authority, they don't feel comfortable stewing in their own mess. Their idea is to make the whole world ambiently like what they are inside. Immediately. We call it war, and chaos and all sorts of threats. But they feel good about that. Just like you feel good in a beautiful, harmonious place. You've got to realize that these people feel irritated in that kind of situation. They're psychically deranged. These are psychological monsters. They just happen to be in control of the world. And therefore they will then make the world a sea of chaos that makes them feel real good. Because they don't feel, they're not like us. They're not like, maybe these are people who are, affiliated with the alien gene. The Course in Miracles explains it. Having projected his anger onto the world, he sees vengeance about to strike at him. His own attacks thus perceived as self-defense. Because that's the delusion that they buy themselves into. They're not attacking anybody. They're defending themselves. Haven't you seen it in so many movies? If you can convince yourself that somebody's attacking you, then you're justified, aren't you, in your own head? You don't care if you're impeached. You don't care if the whole country throws you out. You're justified even if you end up sleeping on a bridge, on a beach under a bridge. If you put these people there, they're still going to have you the story. They're going to tell you about how they were hard done by. Well, don't we all do the same thing? When we're working for the system and the corporation, when we're given the executive badge, it's a wonderful company. As soon as they give us the sack, then we sit at the bar telling all our mates how horrible it was and how they mistreated us. Then, as psychotic as these people are, and this is what really gets me, you see, as psychotic and outrageous and maniacal and murderous as these people are, then they turn to you and go, let's not tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories. Like these are paragons of reason. These are the saintly ones who are going to tell you, don't think. Don't step back from the canvas and use your own reason. For goodness sake, we don't tolerate any of that. You believe what we tell you. Never forget, your slave, me master. The psychotic is telling you, don't use your brain. How psychotic are you when then you do take that advice? Cortez said, mankind has always believed in three things with unconquerable faith. That the effusion of blood is necessary. That there is a manner of shedding blood which is purifying, very important. And another mode which is condemnatory. History clearly attests these truths. It presents to us the narrative of cruel acts of bloody conquests, until the earth appears to us like an immense sea of blood, which neither the piercing breath of the winds can dry up, nor the scorching rays of the sun can absorb. There are such people in the world. So they want to create the schizogenic society, because they are schizophrenic. And the society that they mold and create, we live in, is of their temperament. They're like the fish that can choose, you see, the saline type of water that it's in. 2 million telephone conversations a year are now intercepted by law enforcement. It used to be called peacekeepers. Where's that word gone? Now it's law enforcement, buddy. Between 1990 and 1996, the number of workers under electronic surveillance increased from 8 million to 30 million. Simultaneously, employees eavesdropped on an estimated 400 million telephone conversations a year without government telling you to do it. They just started to do it on their own. Something like 750 calls a minute. That's right. And of course, it's the paranoid society. This way. We're always a fear of something. The warnings on the daily news. It's credit card fraud. It's sexually transmitted diseases. No, it's online safety for our kids. They're being seduced. And yet, even though there's a nationwide federal database for lost knives and forks, there isn't one for abducted children. Maybe we need to find out why. No, it's internet spying. It's genetic implants. It's illegal searches. No, it's insecure borders or terror attacks. And some of these may, in fact, be semi-legitimate. But taken together, they have an effect. They're like a poison. No, it's the greenhouse effect. It's melting bloody icebergs. It's war and rumors of wars. Well, now it's bird flu and whatever is going to come next. I mean, forever. This designer chaos is manufactured. It is the great and endless burlesque, funded from London and Vatican City, courtesy of the Queen. Except their little burlesque and stage play is in real time. It's a snuff film that's global. And they're sitting there loving it, just loving it. When on the news you see all that horror, because they know what it's doing. It's designed to chip away and erode at one's inner security. Because they knew if they came to you openly, to get what they wanted, you wouldn't vote them in. And even if they operate too openly, you wouldn't allow it. But if they can create a steady diet to make you so pathologically afraid, and it's easy to do, we are limbic creatures after all, then we will just fall apart, and we'll be leaking all this negative emotion, and negative fear, and paranoia. And then we'll go, yes, Lucifer, come in and help us, as Albert Pike said would happen. come in and tuck us up in bed. So when you find yourself in this utterly crazy place, this war on terror, let's understand why. It's by design. In fact, you know something? If you're really symbolically literate, whenever this term war on terror, which I might add as a psychological term, it's not saying terrorism, which is political, or terrorists. It says war on terror. Now, terror is a psychological term. It's an inner state. Cold War, nuclear war, atomic war. Think about what those words really mean. They've got very little to do with external things. Atomic war, genetic war, Cold War, now war on terror. And you know how the right brain hears it? It's not war on terror, but war on terra. Terra. War on earth. Because it is a war on earth. And it's old. It's been in the making a long time. But the experts, the scientists know that when you're faced with a life-threatening situation, the reptilian hindbrain, the most primitive part of the human brain, switches off all activity, except that which keeps us alive. It sends the subconscious message, don't move, don't breathe, don't blink, or you'll be seen and attacked. You see? And that's what we do. We switch off. We're in a traumatized situation. Now, of course, we might make the mistake of looking to our little domestic syndromes for the reason for this massive stress. And we often don't really find the answer there. We may do even some cleansing and local homework, and yet it's like normal to be stressed. We don't realize we're like in a culture of stress, like a petri dish. As we said, R.D. Lang said that your insanity, your pathological situation, your stress or whatever, hypertension, this is a perfectly natural adjustment to a totally unnatural and negative environment. So you can keep on researching your little domestic thing and your little relationship problems. Guess what? That may account for a very small fraction of the real reason why you're in the state that you're in, as a matter of fact. So some people finally start to realize or get a grip on this, what I'm talking about. And you might phrase it like some people say, have I been sold a lie? Becomes a mantra. Because I think something's up here. I don't like what I see. I'm not going to wear a tie-dye and become a hippie, but I'm sure that something's off here. Have I been sold a lie? But the smarter person, the one who's really going to affect change in this world, says the same thing but in a different way. He says, have I bought a lie? Because somebody can sell you something, but you don't have to buy it. When you understand that you've bought into it, that these people have no power at all, they do have control, but you have the power. You give it away. Then you affect change. One is a road to nowhere, and the other one is a road to salvation. So what is the great change? The Pluto's approach and the countdown to 2012. What's going to happen? Can we get maybe even a broad theme, a broad pastiche of what that might be? Well, man runs away from his own shadow self and has a sadistic relationship with himself and with his darker emotions, quote unquote. But like biological white blood cells, ladies and gentlemen, these darker emotions exist to signal that something is wrong within the body politic and to let us know that we are under attack, either from ourselves or from some other external source. But where are our altars to these dark guardians? You see, your anger, your stress, your hypertension, your fear, right? All of that. These are aspects of ourselves. We've been conditioned to believe and observe them negatively. So we're in inner conflict. Because now you've got a lower part of yourself and a higher part of yourself. You're inwardly divided. Then how are you going to fix external division? Pluto will bring in it will call for a new relationship with what are laughingly called our darker aspects of ourself. They're only darker because one part of us is so super lit that everything else of our being is cast into darkness. The shadows we fear are cast by our own hand, our own minds. Now, you see, the problem is, though, that it's like, imagine your mind is like the court of the king. You don't like it when these hideous, ragged, evil-smelling, foul-looking, wrinkled old guardians come in to tell the story of what they've seen on their travels. No, we want Don Juan and white horses and perfumery and wonderful tales of high adventure. So when these strange people come into our court and try to tell us in their croaking voices an amazing story of where they've been and what they've seen, we go, get away, anger, get away, violence, get away, all of that. And we're